Welcome back. If you've just come from the Absolute Beginners video, you've got your account, you've tried Claude AI on a real task, and you've completed the describe, read, direct loop at least once. This video picks up exactly where that one left off. We're going deeper on the most important skill in the whole channel, how to describe tasks to Claude AI so it produces something genuinely useful every time. In the Absolute Beginners video, we said that the output you get is almost entirely determined by the context you provide. This video is about exactly what that context is, what to include, why it matters, and how to build the habit so it becomes second nature. By the end of this video, you'll have a simple, repeatable framework for describing any professional task to Claude AI. And you'll have seen it applied to enough examples that it'll feel natural, not like a checklist you're working through, but like a way of thinking. Let's get into it. Quick recap from the Absolute Beginners video, because everything in this video builds on it. The three-step loop: describe, read, direct. You describe the task to Claude AI, giving it enough context to produce something useful. It produces a first output. You read it carefully and identify the one thing that's most off. You give Claude AI one specific direction to fix it. That loop, describe, read, direct, is the foundation. And the first step, describe, is where almost all the value is created or lost. Get the description right, and what comes back is already 80 to 90% of the way to finished. Get it wrong or leave it vague, and you're essentially rewriting from scratch. This whole video is about making step one, the description, as strong as possible, every time. Before we get to the framework, let's understand why most descriptions fail. The most common mistake is describing the task without describing the situation. Write an email about the meeting, tells Claude AI what to produce, but nothing about the context it's producing it for. It doesn't know who the email is going to, what happened in the meeting, what you need the recipient to do, or what tone is appropriate. So Claude AI does what it always does when information is missing. It makes assumptions. And because it doesn't know anything specific about your situation, the assumptions it makes are as generic as possible. They're designed to work for any meeting, any email, any professional relationship, which means they work for none of them specifically. The second common mistake is being vague about the objective. Help me with a proposal doesn't tell Claude AI what the proposal needs to achieve, who it's going to, or what's already been agreed. It knows the format, a proposal, but not the purpose. And the third common mistake is forgetting to mention the audience. Claude AI writes very differently for a CEO reading a briefing before a board meeting than it does for a junior team member reading a project update. If you don't tell it who's reading, it has to guess, and generic audience assumptions produce generic tone, formal when it should be warm, technical when it should be plain, long when it should be brief. These three gaps, missing situation, missing objective, missing audience, are behind the vast majority of underwhelming Claude AI outputs. The framework we're about to cover closes all three. The framework is called the 6-element prompt brief. 6 things to include when you describe a task to Claude AI. You don't need to use them in any particular order. You don't need to label them. You don't need to tick them off a list. The goal is to get to a point where all 6 are present naturally, the way a good explanation to a colleague naturally covers all the relevant information. But at the beginning, and especially when something isn't working, thinking about the 6 elements is the fastest way to find what's missing. Here they are: role, audience, context, outcome, tone, constraints. Let's go through each one. Element 1, role. Who you are or what role you're writing from. I'm a project manager at a mid-sized construction company. I'm an executive assistant supporting a CEO in financial services. I'm a solo consultant specializing in HR strategy. This matters because Claude AI writes differently for different roles. The language, the assumptions, the level of formality, the kind of detail that's relevant. All of it shifts based on who you are and what world you operate in. Without a role, Claude AI writes for a generic professional in a generic organization. With a role, it writes for someone specific, and everything it produces is calibrated to that context. You only need 1 or 2 sentences for this. I'm a marketing manager at a B2B software company is enough. The more specific it is to your actual situation, the better. But even a rough role description is dramatically better than nothing. Element 2, audience. Who the output is for. Not just a job title, a real description of who this person is, what they know, what they care about, and what their relationship to you is. This email goes to our CEO. She's commercially focused, hates waffle, and needs the key point in the first sentence. That's a useful audience description. The audience is senior stakeholders is not, because Claude AI still has to guess what that means for this specific output. Think about what your reader already knows and doesn't know. Think about what they care about and what they find annoying. Think about how formal or informal the relationship is. All of that shapes how Claude AI writes for them. For internal communications, does your team prefer bullet points or prose? Are they technical people who want detail, or operational people who want the headline and the action? For client communications, what's the history? Is this a new relationship or a long-standing one? Formal or warm? The more Claude AI understands your reader, the more it can write for that reader specifically. Element 3, context. And this is the big one. Context is the actual situation. What happened, what's going on, what Claude AI needs to know about your specific circumstances to understand this task, rather than a generic version of it. Context is the element most people leave out, and it's the element that makes the biggest difference. Without context, Claude AI is writing about a generic project delay, a generic client meeting, a generic strategic decision. With context, it's writing about your project delay, with the specific cause and the specific history for your specific client relationship. Here's how to think about what context to include. Ask yourself, what would I tell a capable colleague who'd never worked in my organization if I was asking them to help me with this task? The answer to that question is your context. You'd tell them what happened. You'd tell them the relevant history. You'd tell them what's at stake. You'd tell them anything unusual about the situation that affects how to handle it. That's exactly what Claude AI needs. You don't need to write an essay. 3 to 5 sentences of specific, relevant context is usually enough to transform the output. Element 4, outcome. What the output needs to accomplish, not just what format it should take, what it should actually do. Write an email is a format. Write an email that acknowledges the delay, explains the cause briefly, and reassures the client that we're back on track without being overly apologetic is an outcome. Those 2 briefs will produce very different results. The outcome is where you tell Claude AI what success looks like. What should the reader think after reading this? What should they feel? What should they do? What misunderstanding should this correct? What concern should this address? When you're struggling to define the outcome, that's usually a sign that you're not quite clear yourself on what the output needs to do. And if you're not clear, Claude AI definitely can't be. Taking 30 seconds to think about what success actually looks like before you write your description is almost always worth it. Element 5, tone. How the output should feel to read. And this is more nuanced than professional or friendly, both of which Claude AI defaults to anyway. The most useful tone descriptions are the ones that specify the tension you're navigating. Warm but direct. We have a good relationship, but I need them to actually do something. Professional, but not stiff. We work closely, and the tone should reflect that. Confident, without being arrogant. We're making a strong case, but we don't want to oversell. That kind of specific tone instruction, especially one that names what you're moving toward and what you're moving away from, gives Claude AI the guidance to navigate nuance rather than defaulting to a generic professional voice. You can also reference a specific piece of writing you've already produced and liked. Match the tone of the email I sent last month, and then paste that email in. Claude AI can calibrate its tone against an example as well as it can against a description. Element 6, constraints. Length, format, and anything specific that the output must include or avoid. Length, around 200 words. No more than 1 page. Short, 3 to 4 sentences maximum. Claude AI without a length constraint will default to whatever length feels appropriate, and that default is often longer than you need. Format: bullet points, no bullet points, continuous prose, a letter format, not an email, a numbered list of recommendations, a 2-column table. Specific inclusions or exclusions: include a clear next step at the end. Don't mention the previous supplier, that's sensitive. Make sure it references the meeting we had on Tuesday. Avoid industry jargon. This goes to a non-specialist audience. Constraints are the guardrails that stop Claude AI from doing something technically reasonable that doesn't fit your actual situation. The more specific your constraints, the less editing you'll need to do. Part 2. The framework in practice. 3 worked examples. Each one shows what a weak description looks like, what a strong description looks like, and what changes in the output. Example 1. The update email. Weak description: write a project update email. Strong description: I'm a project manager at a logistics software company. I need to write a weekly update email to our 10 stakeholders, a mix of senior leaders and operational team members who work closely with the project. This week, we completed the database migration on schedule. We're 2 days behind on the user interface testing because one team member was sick, and we've just confirmed the go-live date for next month. Tone: factual and calm. I don't want anyone to panic about the 2-day delay. It's already been resolved. Format: brief bullet points for each workstream, then a 1-sentence forward look. Maximum half a page. What changes? The weak description produces a generic update template. The strong description produces an update that sounds like it came from your project, covers the specific things that happened this week, handles the delay with the right level of reassurance, and fits the format your stakeholders expect. Notice that the strong description covers all 6 elements. Role: project manager at logistics software company. Audience: 10 stakeholders, mix of seniority. Context: what happened this week, including the delay. Outcome: factual update, don't cause alarm. Tone: calm and factual. Constraints: bullet points, maximum half a page. Example 2. Preparing for a difficult conversation with a team member. Weak description: help me prepare for a performance conversation with a team member. Strong description: I'm a team leader at a marketing agency, and I need to have a performance conversation with one of my team members tomorrow. They've been consistently missing deadlines over the last 6 weeks, not by much, but enough that it's affecting the rest of the team. I know they've been dealing with some personal issues, but I don't know the details. I want to raise the performance concern clearly and directly. This needs to be on their record. But I also want to approach it with empathy and give them a chance to tell me what's going on. I'm not looking to manage them out. I want to support them to improve. Help me prepare. What are the key points I need to land? How do I open the conversation? And what should I do if they get defensive or emotional? What changes? The weak description produces generic advice about performance conversations. The strong description produces specific preparation for this conversation, with this team member, about this specific pattern, navigating this specific tension between directness and empathy. This is one of the most valuable uses of Claude AI that people don't think about. It's not just a writing tool, it's a thinking partner. And the better you describe your situation, the more useful its thinking is. Example 3. Summarizing a document. Weak description: summarize this document. Paste document. Strong description: I'm a policy analyst at a government agency. I've been asked to review this 40-page consultation paper on infrastructure funding and brief my director before a meeting with the minister tomorrow. My director needs to understand the 3 most significant proposals, any risks or controversies that are likely to come up in the meeting, and one question the minister is likely to ask that we should be prepared to answer. She has 15 minutes to read the briefing. 1 page maximum, structured with clear headings, plain language. She's not a specialist in this area. What changes? The weak description produces a general summary of the document, probably following its structure and covering everything roughly proportionally. The strong description produces a briefing that's specifically filtered for what your director needs for this meeting with this minister with the right level of detail and the right format for someone reading on the run. The document is the same. The context is what transforms what Claude AI does with it. Here's a simple test you can run on any description before you send it. Read what you've written. Then ask, could someone who had never met me, never worked in my organization, and had never dealt with this specific situation produce something genuinely useful from this? If the answer is yes, your description is strong. Claude AI has what it needs. If the answer is no, something's missing. Usually it's one of three things. The actual situation isn't specific enough, the audience isn't described clearly enough, or the objective isn't defined tightly enough. Find the gap and fill it. Run this test on your next 5 Claude AI interactions. You'll immediately see where you're leaving things out and what changes when you add them. Part 3. Building the habit so you don't have to think about. The 6-element framework is a scaffold, not a permanent structure. You use it consciously until you don't need to anymore. Here's how that transition typically works. In the first week, you think about the 6 elements as you write. You might even check them off mentally. Role, yes. Audience, yes. Context, have I said enough? Outcome, yes. Tone, I should add that. Constraints, word count. It feels deliberate and slightly slow. In the second and third week, the deliberate checking speeds up. You start to feel when something's missing before you've consciously checked the list. The context gap, in particular, becomes something you notice almost immediately. By week 4 and beyond, you don't think about the framework at all. You just write descriptions that happen to include all 6 elements, because that's now how you naturally explain a task. The same way an experienced journalist naturally writes a strong lead paragraph without thinking about the who, what, where, when, why checklist they learned early in their career. This isn't something you have to work hard at. It comes from repetition. Use Claude AI on real tasks every day for a few weeks, and the habit builds itself. Here's a practical shortcut to building the habit faster. Identify the 3 tasks you do most often in Claude AI. For most professionals, it's something like emails, weekly updates or reports, and either meeting prep or document summaries. For each of those 3 tasks, write a template description. Not a description of a specific task, but a framework for that task type that you can fill in each time. Like this: I'm role, and I need to write type of email to audience description. What happened? Context. I need this email to outcome. Tone description. Length, constraint. Keep that template somewhere accessible. A note on your phone, a document on your desktop, the free one-pager in the description of this video. Each time you use Claude AI for that task type, open the template, fill in the specifics, and send it. After about 10 uses of the same template, you won't need it anymore. You'll just write the description from memory because you've done it enough times that it's become instinctive. Even with a strong description, Claude AI will occasionally produce something that isn't quite right. Here's how to diagnose and fix it. If the tone is off, you probably didn't describe the relationship specifically enough. Add more about who the reader is, what your relationship is like, and what tone works for them specifically. If it's too generic, the context is probably missing something important. Ask yourself, what's the specific thing about this situation that makes it different from a generic version of the same task? Add that. If it's the right content, but the wrong format, your constraints weren't specific enough. Go back and add length, structure, and format instructions. If it missed the main point, your outcome wasn't defined clearly enough. Be explicit about what the output needs to accomplish, not just what it should cover, but what it should do. And remember, you can always just tell Claude AI what's wrong. This is too formal. The relationship is much warmer than this. You've missed the main point. The delay is our fault, not the supplier's. This is too long. Cut it by half without losing the key points. Direct, specific feedback in the same conversation is often the fastest fix. One more habit worth building alongside the description habit: the iteration habit. Before you finalize any Claude AI output, give it one direction. Just one. The single most important thing that could make it better. Not because the output is necessarily wrong, but because one round of direction almost always produces something noticeably stronger. And the direction itself forces you to read the output properly, which is how you catch things you'd otherwise miss. The people who consistently get the best results from Claude AI have made this automatic. Describe, read, one direction, finalize. That 4-step process takes barely any longer than a 2-step process, but the output is consistently and reliably better. Don't skip the direction step just because the first output seems fine. Seems fine is not the same as genuinely excellent, and genuinely excellent is what you're aiming for. Part 4. What's next in the Start Here series? Your challenge before you move to the next video. Take 3 tasks from your actual working week, different types if possible. An email, a summary, a preparation task. For each one, write a description using the 6 elements before you open Claude AI. Don't worry about making it perfect. Just make sure role, audience, context, outcome, tone, and constraints are all there in some form. Then run the loop. Describe, read, direct. Notice the difference between what you get now and what you were getting before, when you were writing shorter, vaguer descriptions. 3 tasks, 6 elements, 1 direction per output. That's the whole exercise. Come back to the next video once you've done it, because everything in the next video builds on this one. Here's where you are in the Start Here series. Video 1, Absolute Beginners. What Claude AI is, getting set up, your first interaction, and the Describe, Read, Direct loop. Done. Video 2, Beginners. The 6-element framework, 3 worked examples, building the habit. That's this video. Done. Video 3, your first prompt brief. This goes deeper on the relationship between prompts and briefs and introduces a way of thinking about Claude AI that changes everything about what you include. It's the conceptual underpinning of what you've just learned, and it makes the framework feel less like a checklist and more like a mindset. Video 4, Co-work for beginners. This is where things get genuinely powerful. Co-work is Claude AI's dedicated workspace, where you build projects that hold all the context you'd otherwise have to explain every time. By the end of that video, you'll have your first co-work project set up and running. Work through them in order. Each one builds on the last. One more thing before the products. The 6-element framework is the beginner version of something we call a prompt brief, a term this channel coined to describe the shift from typing commands at Claude AI to briefing it the way you'd brief a capable colleague. Episode 7 of the main Claude for Work channel goes deep on this concept, the history of the word prompt, why it shapes how most people think about Claude AI, and what changes when you make the mental shift to thinking in briefs. If you want the conceptual foundation that sits underneath the framework you've just learned, that episode is worth watching. Link in the description. 2 things in the description. The brief, 1 page, is free. It's the 6-element framework, the brief quality test, and 3 iteration prompts on 1 printable sheet. This is the template I mentioned earlier, the one you keep next to you while you're building the habit. Print it, keep it open, use it until you don't need it anymore. Your first week with Claude AI at work is $20. Day 1 builds the brief framework in detail and gives you a reusable template for your most common task types. Day 3 gives you 5 professional task templates you can use immediately. If you want the structured path rather than the self-guided version, that's it. Both links in the description. Via Claude for Lawyers on Gumroad while we set up the Claude for Work store. Same creator. That's the beginner's video. 6 elements, 3 examples, 1 test, 1 iteration habit. Use it on 3 real tasks before the next video. That's the episode.